thank you so much for watching the Multicultural channel, Community Hour. My name is Fernanda Vallejo, and today we're going to discover or learn a bit more about the author of A Winnipeg Story. Germano, tell me a little bit more about your book. Why did you decide to write A Winnipeg Story?
To put it simply, the reason why I decided to write this book was, in the beginning, it was just kind of a therapeutic process. I had gone through a lot of great and traumatic experiences in my life, and I'd never really talked about any of it with anyone, including lots of family members and friends. So when I came back to Canada in December of last year of 2022, it was always an idea in my head, but I decided to actually sit down and try to write out a couple of chapters, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Okay, so the book is about your life. Where were you born? Where are you from?
I was born here in Winnipeg at the Women's Health Science Center, November 3rd, 1988. And I grew up here for the majority of my life in an area called Transcona.
Tell me a little bit more about your early life, your mom, your dad, your background story.
Yeah, so again, I grew up in Transcona. Childhood was relatively normal. Didn't have a great time in school. Got bullied a lot. I was diagnosed with ADHD early on, and I was on medication and all kinds of things. And I didn't have a great time in the elementary years and going on. For home, my dad was a traditional Italian, and my mom was Irish. And up until I was about 10 or 11 years old, they were together until they got a divorce. My mom was definitely like the glue of the family. She was just how you would expect a wife or a mom to be at home, just always cooking, cleaning, working, and just taking care of the kids. And my dad, he was a passionate guy. He loved to sing, he loved hockey, he loved working out, that kind of stuff. But he was troubled, to say the least, and we didn't have an easy childhood growing up because of it. Me and my two older sisters, so.
Your sisters?
Yeah.
Okay. You told me that you went through a group home. How was the situation? How did you get involved in this? What happened?
Yeah. So what happened was basically, like I said, my parents divorced when I was around 10 or 11. I can't remember exactly. But from there, I just started kind of acting out towards my mother. I think subconsciously I was upset with her for my dad not being around, even though it wasn't her fault. Mm-hmm. As a child, you don't understand that. So I just started to become a lot angrier and more aggressive and just wasn't listening to her. And I think at one point she just finally had enough and she felt like nothing was working with me. So I was placed in a group home through CFS. And I spent about a year there in total, I believe, going between different houses.
How did you feel at that period of your life with the CFS involved?
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, again, like being a child, you have no understanding of what's going on. Mm-hmm. You know, I would be asking when I'm going home and I wouldn't get an answer. Yeah. So, I mean, that part was scary. But I think it was almost like a culture shock for me because I grew up in Transcona, like I said, and I was just used to seeing a different kind of child my age out there. I felt like when I got moved into these group homes in like Elmwood and North End and stuff, I just saw that they were just obviously tougher kids and more upset than I was and were quicker to lash out. And because of that, I ended up getting in a lot of fights with them. Sure. Over stupid stuff, you know what I mean? Like someone eats the last of the snacks or someone took someone's pillow or whatever it was, right? That's just kind of how it was. I also realized, though, at the time, the one positive thing about it, I will say, is I realized how lucky I was where I was, because a lot of the kids that were in the same situation as me, their family life back home was much more volatile and toxic, you know what I mean? They had, you know, drunk parents or parents that were on drugs or gambling and stuff like that. And I didn't have anything like that. My mom was a great mom and she wasn't into anything like that. So the one positive I took out of it was, like, obviously I missed her terribly and my sisters. but it made me realize that that I got it pretty good there at home. Yeah.
Do you think like a lot of children and teenagers are going through these kind of situations, like going to shelters, having a tough life here in Winnipeg, and what could be one of the reasons?
Yeah, so it's definitely difficult, especially here in Manitoba and in Winnipeg. I think that there's an array of different reasons, and it goes. I'd like to think that a lot of it has to do with the parenting.
Okay.
So a lot of these children or teenagers that end up in foster care or end up in group homes or whatever it is, it's usually, not always, but usually stems from just kind of having bad parenting. Like something's wrong with the parents. They may have some issues, or they're going through a divorce or an addiction or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I just noticed that it's usually not the kid's fault, and it's hard to blame a child. Do you know what I mean? Because they can only handle so much responsibility at a
They're
certain
like
age.
little sponges, no?
Exactly. They absorb everything in their environment. So I think that's why a lot of them end up there. And then there's a whole nother issue. There is, we spoke on the phone last night and we were talking about the entitlement issues, right?
Yeah.
So putting the responsibility, back on the kids and the teenagers, I would say that our generations are just getting worse and worse when it comes to this entitlement issue where kids and teenagers feel like they're owed the world and that they don't have to work for anything, and their parents owe them the world, and it's just, that's not the reality of life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, do you feel lucky when you went to the group home, because it was not like the shelters that we have now? In some shelters, people don't take care at all of these little children.
Right.
What was the situation there? I know you got involved in some fights, already mentioned that, but were they taking care of you?
Yeah, definitely. From my experience with it, there's always a couple of staff members that are just there to get a check. Mm-hmm. They don't really care about, the clients and stuff like that. But I'd say the majority are good and they have good intentions, and because of that, you feel like you're in a safe place. And I mean, they make sure that you're fed and that you're going to school and that you have social activities. So overall, it was good.
And did you met a lot of troubled teenagers?
Yeah, everybody was. Like, I can't think of someone that was normal in a sense that, like, they didn't have something going on with their lives, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you learn something from them?
No.
Like the good and the bad.
To be honest, if it's good and bad, I just learned to be tougher. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's a bad thing in some people's eyes, but for me, it was also a good thing because it kind of let me know the reality of the world. Transcorn was kind of a blanket place. Yeah. You don't get exposed to a lot of things out there. So it definitely taught me more about the world and toughened me up a little bit, which was good. Yeah.
Good. You went through the homelessness, streets, night groups, etc. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so when I got out of the group home, I want to say I was probably around 12 or 13.
Okay.
And even though during the time I was appreciative of going back home, I definitely began to listen to my mother even less. And I was more upset with her. I started feeling abandonment issues because she had left, I felt that she left me in this place and didn't care about me, which obviously wasn't true, right? Mm-hmm. But from there, I started hanging out with, like, you could say bad apples. I was hanging out with the kids that were skipping school and smoking marijuana or whatever else. And that kind of developed throughout my teenage years into me hanging out with people that were in the streets. So some gang members, drug dealers and stuff. At the time, I wasn't doing anything myself, criminal, but I was definitely hanging out with a lot of those people, and it was kind of inevitable that I would eventually get into something because of my environment. Like you said, we're like a sponge, right? So the homelessness didn't happen till a little bit later on. I lost my mom when I was about 22 or 23. There was no illness or anything. It was just one day she was gone type thing. And from there, I just kind of stopped caring about certain things even more. I got a little bit more into the streets, and at the time I was also promoting Like I was doing my own events, electronic music events, and DJing and stuff. And then I was introduced to this whole rave underworld, where, you know, I probably had the best days of my life, to be honest.
Maybe more drugs are involved.
Yeah, that is the downside of it. Like I did get involved with using a little bit of drugs. I was never addicted. I was never somebody that you would see like high every day or something, but once a month or whatever it was at an event, you know, sometimes I would take something. And then, yeah, after a couple of years of that, of doing the promotions and the DJing and being part of that social circle, I was working a job at the time, and I got involved with a married woman. And at first it was just fun, and it wasn't, it was not sexual. It was nothing like that. It was just very friendly and joking and stuff like that. But it turned into something else on her end. She wanted to leave her husband, and it just got way too serious for me. So I asked to be moved, or for her to be moved to a different department. And I was kind of laughed at, and he thought it was a joke, my supervisor at the time. So I had already had a lot of encounters over the years, whether it was with education or group homes or my mom or whoever, that I really just didn't have a good trust and faith in authority. And I just felt like every time that I was trying to do the right thing, there would be something that held me back and pushed me back a couple steps. So I actually decided at one point, just randomly, I was quitting the job, and then I decided I needed some time alone and to just kind of disconnect from reality in the world. So I ended up going to a homeless shelter, and that's where I stayed at Siloam Mission.
Siloam Mission.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think like if you had more support when you were a little child at the school, some of these things couldn't happen, like getting
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's good that you use that word, because that was something that I've been talking about recently since I did the book, was I've never had a support system. So even with my mom back in the day when she was around, she took care of me, but she taught me really nothing about being a man or about principles or values or money or anything, right? So I really had to learn everything on my own. And I definitely think there's a positive and a negative to it as well, right? Having to do everything yourself and having to learn from the ground up is empowering in a sense. Yeah. And it gives you all the tools that you need for life, but it's definitely a difficult path. And it's something that, like, I don't wish for anybody. I really do think my life would have been completely different if I had the proper support system and, you know, better parenting. And, you know, this is not to take the blame off myself, because I did a lot of things myself as well, right? But I also keep in mind that I was just a kid, right? And that, again, only a certain level of responsibility belongs to me. So, yeah, it would have been a completely different case if I'd grown up differently.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of anger, you went through depression, but how you got involved into the crime system, I will say? Yeah,
so that time being homeless, which was about 5 months, and I want to say it was 2014, 2015, one of the years. But it was the best thing for me, to be honest, because I was always kind of all over the place. I had no real structure or system in my life. And to be honest, a homeless shelter, this sounds terrible, but I don't mean it the way that a lot of people will think. It's almost like prison in the sense that there's a set of rules and regulations and kind of like a code to follow while you're in there. So, I mean, like, you wake up at a specific time every day. You go out at a specific time, shower, all that stuff. And it was new to me because I had always kind of like just did whatever I wanted and didn't follow a particular system. And then to be in there, it was the first time I was forced to basically follow rules. Do you know what I mean? But it was really good for me, and I was happier and healthier and sleeping better and all kinds of stuff. So it was actually a really peaceful moment in my life, to be honest. And at the time I wasn't working either, so I just really had a lot of free time to think and stuff. During my time there, though, I met someone that was what we call on the lam, which means they were on the run. So they were from a different part of Canada, and they were a part of organized crime. There had been a bust recently in Ontario and Quebec, and they had arrested a bunch of people, and some people either went to jail or they fled. And I ended up meeting an older gentleman that had fled, and we became just friends. I didn't know anything about him. He was just an older guy that I liked to help out, like grab him coffee or grab his food or get him a blanket when he was cold, like that kind of thing. And he always appreciated it. He spoke like broken English, basically. He spoke a lot of Sicilian. I'm Italian. My background is Italian, but I didn't speak it growing up because when my parents divorced, I was kind of cut off from my dad's side. So I would hear Italian up until I was 10, 11 years old or whatever, but I didn't really speak it because I grew up with an Irish family.
Yeah.
So he would speak to me in like broken English and Sicilian or whatever. And yeah, we just became really good friends. He was there for a couple of months. He didn't stay in the actual shelter, but he would come there to eat and stuff like that and to talk with me, have coffee. And then one day he tells me that he's leaving and he's going back home. Doesn't really tell me where back home is, but he thanks me for helping him and taking care of him. And he basically said, you know, in a couple of months that he'll have a job opportunity for me if I want to make some extra money. And at the time I was broke and I was homeless. So, I mean, anything sounded good to me, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, sure enough, a couple of months, I'd given him my phone number and my email. A couple of months later, I was contacted by a friend of his. And that's how I got into the heavier side of crime. I became a debt collector for organized crime for about a year and a half.
Regarding the debt collections,
Yeah.
how did it works? What did you learn? How did you have access to people's accounts and all that stuff?
Yeah, so what it was in the beginning was I was basically given a list.
Okay.
And this list would have numbers, phone numbers, names, addresses, and then amounts, right? Whatever they owed. And what they owed could be anything from a gambling debt to an addiction debt or a loan, whatever it was, right? And some of the amounts were really small, like a couple $1,000s, and then some of them were $50,000, $100,000, right? So I got all of my information from whoever I was collecting for at the time.
Did you have to like kind of enter to their houses to ask to pay back or?
Yeah, so yeah, it was all in person. Sometimes if it was a smaller amount, I would make a phone call.
Okay.
And I would just say, hey, like, you know, I'm just checking in. I was basically the guy that they sent before they sent somebody else. Like, that's one thing I've tried to say. I was not like a thug. I was not somebody that beat people up for debts or anything like that. I was kind of the guy that they set in to try to kind of mediate and say, like, if somebody owed a $10,000 debt, I would go to them and say, man, like, put $1,000 or $2,000 on it, put something so that something bad doesn't happen. Because some of these were a little bit more serious and a higher amount of money. So that's how it worked for me.
Okay, and this is a reality here in Canada, in Winnipeg. Right?
100%, yeah. There's a whole underworld that specifically in Canada, but also very prevalent here in Winnipeg, that most people that walk the streets every day have no idea about. And that's everything from drugs and gangs to organized crime, and anything that you can imagine that you've seen in the movies is very prevalent here. Yeah.
So after being a debt collector, you told me that you traveled to Europe, some countries, also in South America.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about it.
Sure. So, like I said, I did the debt collections for about a year and a half.
Okay.
It got to a point that I felt like I was getting too deep in with the organization. They also wanted me to start carrying like a firearm, which I never had in a year and a half. It just seemed that the amounts were getting bigger and it was getting more serious, so they wanted me to be protected in a sense, and I wasn't okay with that. I was okay with collecting money, but I wasn't geared towards violence or anything like that. So the minute that I heard about that, and they also were telling some mutual friends that they were going to ask me to start dealing and stuff like that and organizing shipments, I was out. You know, I kind of told them before they could ask me, I decided to just leave.
Just to leave.
Because I don't want to refuse, right? So I ended up, let's say 2016, I started traveling for the first time in my life. I originally went to Mexico to meet my brother who had met a woman out there and basically fallen in love and wanted me to come out there and see what he was doing. That same year, I visited a couple other places. I was in New York, Puerto Rico, and Chile. But it wasn't until the next year that I really started to get into other things. And that was my first trip to Italy in 2017, where things changed for me.
Did you meet someone interesting or a gangster in Italy?
Yes. So as you know a little bit about my story. Throughout that year, I can't tell you exactly when because I went to Italy about 4 times that year, in Europe in general. I had met with someone that was another figure of organized crime, but he was from Calabria in southern Italy, and he lived in Milan. So him and his family had rackets there, and what I mean by rackets is just they would do drug dealing, extortion. They also had legitimate businesses, they owned and operated casinos, restaurants, all kinds of stuff. And we, by chance, just became friendly with each other. The guy saw me at the same place a lot. And one day he heard that I was speaking English on the phone with someone, so he spoke to me in English. We became close. And he kind of became my mentor in the underworld. He basically let me know how things existed in the shadows all over the world. And through him, I ended up getting some business opportunities in other parts of the world, and that's what brought me to Central America a couple of years later.
Because of their connections, no?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. After Italy, which other country did you visit, or when?
Yeah. So I that year, 2017, I really started to travel a lot. I went to 10, 15 different countries in Europe. Around the same time, though, I started going to London a lot because I would always go there to break up the flights. Eventually, I started doing some stuff in London as well. But before we get to that, I traveled to Panama in 2019. I think it was April 1st or April 2nd that I arrived there. And the man that I had met a couple of years earlier in Milan had introduced me to a Lebanese guy that lived in Panama. And he was a real estate guy, and he had a restaurant and stuff like that. But he was also doing money laundering, and he had a couple of schemes going on that I eventually got involved with when I went to Panama that year in 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things going on in Panama.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. After
Definitely.
Panama, you went to other countries, no? South America or still in Central America?
Yeah, so quickly into Panama, I met a girl there.
Okay.
I was on Tinder before I went to Panama because I wanted to meet someone that spoke English. I had never been to Panama, and my Spanish wasn't that good at the time. So I really tried to meet someone online just to hang out with because I don't want to be alone. You know what I mean? I was already going there for my reasons, right? To kind of connect with this guy, but I also wanted something to do on my time off. So I end up talking to this girl that's from Nicaragua, and she didn't speak English, but I was using a translator most of the time. And we connected right away. We spent a lot of time together. Almost every day that she wasn't working, she was with me. And then we kind of fell in love. And shortly after, I want to say a month and a half in, I went to Canada. I sent her back to Nicaragua, and I made plans to move to Nicaragua and be with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after Nicaragua,
Yeah.
what was the next country?
So I was in Nicaragua probably for about, I want to say 7 or 8 months on and off. And then the relationship eventually ended. I went back to Panama just to kind of sort things out in my head. Because I had made this huge move. I'd literally moved across the world and rented a house and all kinds of stuff. And then COVID hits. So I'm in Panama, and then I go back to Winnipeg, let's say 2020 January.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that year COVID hits, right?
Okay.
So I'm trapped, just like everybody else. I stayed in the country as long as I could, probably around 5 or 6 months. I was in Winnipeg. And then the minute that I had a chance to get out, I wanted to go back to Latin America. I knew that, but Panama wasn't open. And there a lot of the other countries that I wanted to go to weren't. So somebody told me about Ecuador. And then that introduced me to the idea of going there. I believe I went to Costa Rica first, and then I went to Ecuador shortly after, and I fell in love with it. I spent like 5 weeks there. I was originally going to go for a week, but I loved it so much that I ended up staying like, over a month.
Over a month.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and in all these countries, you had like the same connections, no? Or were you doing the...
No, I'm like every time that I went somewhere new, I would make friends. Like that was the huge thing that like I discussed in the book is like I was not a gangster, I was not a thug. Okay. I did some criminal stuff, but the thing with me was I made a lot of connections just based on how I am, like how I'm speaking with you today. I would speak with people. Everybody like that. Yeah, new people. So I met people in cartels, in the mob, in, like all over the world, from Europe and Africa, obviously Latin America, because I spent a lot of time out there. But yeah, it was, I was never tied to anything myself, but I had a lot of friends that were doing a lot of stuff, part of these organizations. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so during your period of time in Ecuador, how many months or for how long were you been there? Were you in Ecuador? I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I was there, like I said, originally I was there about 5 weeks. And then I went back to Canada. I traveled back to Costa Rica with a friend of mine just for like a quick vacation. And then I decided while I was out there, I'm like, I'm going back to Ecuador. I really liked it there. I'd made a lot of friends. I was seeing a girl out there as well. And I felt like I could move there. Okay. It felt like, I wanted to spend more time to see if I could maybe make a transition into moving there. So I go back for that second time, and that's like December. That's December 2020, like towards the end of the year. And at the time, like I said, I had made some friends, including a lot of Venezuelans. And one of them happened to be my barber. And he basically, after so many times of me going there and seeing him, we get close, we start talking and stuff. I start talking about Panama. And he asks me if there's anyone that I know that would help get like other Venezuelans to Panama from Ecuador. And I looked into it, and after a while I met some Colombian guys that were living in Panama that would, for a fee, bring these guys from Ecuador to Colombia, and from Colombia through the Darien Gap into Panama. So, yeah.
What period of your life you stop not working but dealing with the Italian mafia and the cartels? When did you decide to move forward?
To stop?
Yeah.
So I came back to Canada last year, December 2022, and that's when I completely left everything. I was already kind of on my way out. I had met a woman and gotten married, and she had 2 kids, not with me, with someone else. And I really wanted to do my best to take care of her and the kids. So I had already had plans to kind of get out of the life, so to speak. My plan was to move to Paraguay and set up some legitimate businesses and take care of her and the family. And I pursued that for a while, and it didn't happen. Things went the other way, but that was when I started to stop doing certain things that I was doing, and kind of put an end to the stuff that I was doing, especially internationally. But it all completely stopped just last year in December 2022.
Did you make a lot of money?
Yeah. I was doing, at my peak, I was probably doing around 400,000 a year, 450,000. A bad year for me was like $250,000, 300,000. So, yeah, there was a lot of money in it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you moved back to Winnipeg, now you're in Winnipeg, are you
Right.
still talking to these old friends from the shelters?
Like from the underworld and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I'm friends with, like
Okay.
genuinely friends, like no business interests or anything like that. And then there's a couple like my mentor that I told you. When I decided to write the book, I kind of checked in with everybody because there's some things I talk about in the book. Like at the beginning of the book, it'll basically say that I don't say any names, not of people, not of organizations specifically or anything, out of respect for them.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly, and for my own safety, right? But yeah, I checked in with them and just said, is this okay if I do it in this format? If I just say, if I say the Italians or if I say the Colombians or whatever, like, is anyone going to be upset? That kind of stuff. But when it comes to like the criminal aspect, I don't. I left that a year ago. I made my choice, and there was a reason why I made that choice. And I felt like the heat was coming. I'm lucky enough. I'm 35 years old now. I've never been to jail. I don't have a criminal record. I got away with doing a lot of stuff that most people would be locked up for or dead. So I took it as a win, even though I walked away from it and I lost a bunch of money at the time. I told myself it was a win because I got out of this life. I don't have any bruises or anything like that, you know what I mean? And it was better to just go back to the civilian world, work a job like everybody else, and just have that peace of mind.
Try to do things right.
Exactly, yeah.
Good. And give you a better opportunity for sure to
Exactly.
survive, no
Yeah.
stress. Now, would you like to talk about your podcast?
Oh, okay. So I did an interview a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, and that's where a lot of the crime is highlighted, a lot more. It's a true crime podcast, right? So I talk a lot more in depth about what I was doing overseas and what I was doing in Canada and stuff like that. But if you want to check that out, you can just go to YouTube, type in The Connect with Johnny Mitchell, and you can see my video interview there. I'm thinking of doing a podcast myself. I wanted to do something in January, but I'm also focusing on the release of the book, which comes out January 1st. So between now and then, I'm basically finishing up the bonus chapters because what you have here is a rough copy. So the final copy, the master copy, is going to be out January 1st. So I'm working really hard to get the bonus chapters done in the next week or so. And then I'm also trying to get an audio book because I realize like a lot of people in our generation and the younger, they don't read a lot. So I really want to get an audio book done. But if you want to know more, you can check me out on Instagram at the real Germano Tomassetti. You can check out the interview on YouTube, like I mentioned. And like I said, the book will be available January 1st. For sure, ebook, softcover, hardcover on Amazon, but it'll probably be on other platforms and other formats as well.
Do you feel like writing this book was like your best therapy to go, to overcome all the depression and things you went through in your life?
Yeah, it gave me true freedom. So I had economic freedom in my life. I had a liberty to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. But to talk about my life, to talk about my problems, to talk about my emotions and just every aspect of me, this was the first time I've ever done that in 35 years of my life. So the book was definitely therapeutic for me. It also cleared the air because there was a lot of people that thought I was doing something else over these years. When you have a lot of money, people assume that you're a drug dealer right away. And I always hated drugs. I was like a traditional guy in the sense that I hated, alcoholism. I hated gambling. I hated drugs. I hated stuff that just ruins families because I've seen it happen within my own. So that being said, it was very therapeutic and yeah, it gave me a chance to tell my story before other people start talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's talk a little bit more about Winnipeg.
Sure.
Because Winnipeg is a nice place.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But some people, some newcomers or people in general around Canada, they think is one of the most dangerous city. What do you think? Is that true, or only if you get involved with bad people?
I'd say it's 50-50. I think that a lot of people that get into trouble are looking for it, you know. That being said, yeah, there's certain parts of the city you don't want to walk around at night, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But it's not somewhere that like a lot of petty theft happens. I mean, you can think of guys that take off on their taxis and don't pay or stuff like that. But I mean, I don't feel, I mean, I'm different, but I don't feel unsafe to walk around downtown at night or something like that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and a lot of people that think that this is a really dangerous city, they don't understand that Canada as a whole is a lot safer than even some of the places in the U.S., like the cities in the U.S., where you can't walk to a 7-Eleven at night because you could get shot or robbed. There is crime here. There is, like I said, there is an underworld here. There is all petty crimes, whatever, that kind of stuff. But I think that Winnipeg is a great place to live, and that's why I kept coming back here. And specifically, the people. I mean, I think everybody that I know in my social circle says the same thing, is that this place is special because of the people. And people are kind here, and they're nice, and they're soft, and they're welcoming. You know, not everybody, you know, there's definitely bad apples, but overall, if you compare it to the bigger cities in Canada, I feel like it's a little bit more intimate here.
You know, even the homeless in the streets, they are kind of super polite when they are asking you for some change, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not like in South America trying to stab you for a cell phone or stuff
It's
like
true,
that.
yeah. They'll say please, and you know, and if you don't have anything to give them, they won't be upset.
Okay. The supporting system here, what can the government or the province of Manitoba can do better in order to help all these children that are going through your problems? For example, you said you didn't have enough support.
Yeah.
You weren't a smart guy, but at the school maybe people used to bully you.
Yeah.
Then the teenagers on drugs. What do you think we can try to ask?
So I think that the easiest thing to do, and probably the cheapest financially because the government has budgets, I think the best thing to do is to get to these kids while they're still in like junior high. Like, don't even wait till high school. Once they're in grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, you have people that go out there, even people like myself, that go in and do public speaking. Like, you see public speaking is such a big thing in the world right now, like for people that want to, you know, gain financial wisdom or whatever else, or lose weight or whatever it is. So I think that the same thing should be targeted for children and teenagers, but on a more realistic level and something more down to earth, in the sense that like you have someone go in, you have an assembly, which they do in schools, where everybody comes, and you have a couple of specialists come in, whether that's a psychologist, a guy from the streets, or, you know, ex gang member or something like that. People that actually have experience living, you know what I mean, and know how to deal with problems, and have, a history. You get them to go in and talk to these kids. I really think it could help. If somebody came to me when I was in junior high that was like me, and kind of just let me know, like, you know, this isn't worth it, or there are systems in place for you to get help and stuff like that, I think it would have changed my life detrimentally. So I think that's the easiest way to do it, is just put these programs in place for kids to let them know that they have access to help or advice or guidance or whatever else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To get better advice, because when you're a teenager, you think drugs are cool.
Yeah.
Either start smoking. How old do you think are teenagers or kids when they have their first, I don't know, they smoke marijuana first time or cigarettes?
Now it's got to be 11, 12.
12.
Yeah. For me, when I first tried marijuana, I was about 13 years old, right? 13, 14. But I was young. Like, there was a lot of people that didn't try it till they were like 16 or 17. And I just feel like every year it's getting earlier. And on top of that, they're trying harder drugs younger too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've seen my friends' little brothers start doing, you know, ecstasy or cocaine or whatever it is at like, you know, 15, 16 years old.
Because
you know what I mean?
of their friends, no?
Of course, your social circle. But I mean, that in itself is another topic, because,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, like, because of the parenting at home sometimes, that's why a lot of kids go to the streets and to the gangs. They don't have that sense of unity or family. The gang life or street life offers them that, or addiction. So that's why they go that way.
In this last year, how your life changed?
Oh, it changed dramatically. So, like I said, I walked away from that life. I had always wanted to write a book, again, for the therapeutic and just because I had some crazy experiences. So I always thought to do it, but then when I came back, I'm like, hey, I should really sit down and do this. Eventually, around June or July of this year, I started actually writing the chapters. I wrote the book in a couple of months. I basically printed 500 copies just for Winnipeg and some friends outside of Winnipeg. I promoted it at 201 Portage. They have a billboard there. Then I went to New York in Times Square, promoted it there. And then I did the interview, which I mentioned in LA a couple weeks ago. So I'm just really doing my best. This book itself, the one that I gave you, again, it's the rough copy. This has been discontinued as of December 1st. So the real book, official book, like I said, comes out January 1st. And there is something in that book for everybody. So a lot of the people that have been adding me on Instagram that got the story of my book from the podcast, they thought it was just a crime story. And it really isn't. It's a survival story. I talk about my entire life growing up here, you know, issues with the education system, with my parents, the streets, everything else. There's so much more to it. So I really feel that anybody that sits down and reads this book, there will be something in there that they can resonate with.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you want to give any advice to the people that are looking at you right now?
Sure. This is just from my experience. I can't tell you that it's going to be like this for everybody else, but I want to say that it's never too late to make changes in your life, difficult changes. And it's also never too late to pursue your dreams. You can still do great things even if you fail a few times. I came back from losing everything. I left a marriage. I left a lot of money. I left a, liberated life behind because I wanted to go straight and because I wanted to actually feel good about what I was doing. And, just a few months in, I end up writing a book and then I'm traveling to all these places promoting it. So I hope that people will find some kind of motivation or inspiration from this because a lot of us get lost in the thought that we think that nobody else knows what we're going through and that we don't know how to deal with this on our own. But there is help out there and there is resources and advice. And if nothing else, you can message me on Instagram. I'll have some words for you and hopefully help you along the way. But like I said, there's something in this book for everybody. Get what you can out of it and move forward and make those changes that you need to in your life and do great things because we're all capable.
Yeah, so maybe all these things happen because of a reason. Now you are here showing us your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, your life changed a lot. And how people can find you once again on social media?
The Instagram is the best way. I just got Instagram for the first time in my life 5 months ago to help promote the book. I was never on social media at all. But yeah, you can find me at The Real Germano Tomassetti. I'm sure you'll put it in like a link or something. Yeah, it's not easy to spell. So that's the best way to reach me for now. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for coming today. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much for watching the Multicultural channel Community Hour. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.